Now, continuing on and actually finishing up on the style of assessment questions that you'll have with the new assessment model of units, we're going to have a look now over at our observation reports and third-party evidence. So far we've covered formative and the two styles of summative assessments, which are projects and question and answer type assessments. Now we need to have a look at what's included in a observation report. Now it's worth noting that you don't definitely have to do this. You'll be advised by your trainer on the requirements of undertaking these assessment reports. However, you should prepare yourself as if you were going to be required to answer these questions on the chance that you may need to answer the questions. So there's a lot of information here that can be a bit confusing at first glance, so we'll just walk through it. Up the top here, there's just a bit of a guide on what must be demonstrated. So we're going to, you need to show that you can perform the following required skills and related performance criteria. So the required skill that's being checked against is one called communication skills to articulate expected standards of performance, to provide effective feedback, and to coach staff who need development. And then it gets broken down further into some of these other performance criteria which make up the entire unit called Manage People Performance. So that's worth having a bit of a scan through. A lot of it actually makes more sense to the trainer than to you, but it is still worth having a scan through and for you to quickly evaluate for yourself that, can I do something like this? Do I know how to provide informal feedback to staff on a regular basis? And you will have actually already covered that within your previous answers somewhere within formative or summative assessments. So everything you actually see here should be information you actually now know, and you would actually relish the opportunity to show your competence in this in the form of someone observing the tasks being done. Scroll down a little bit and it gets a bit more specific, and this will help you out. So if we were to do this observation task for you, and we're looking at all these things, ultimately the types of things that we would need to observe within the task are as follows. Can you conduct performance reviews? You don't know what that is now because you haven't actually done your reading, but by the time you got to this point in your learning, you absolutely would know what that is, and you actually would have provided examples of it already. Can you write performance improvement and development plans? Can you explain a code of conduct at team meetings? And so on and so on. So the great news is, although you would have almost no clue on what these are right now, in reality, when you do get to this stage of your unit, you absolutely would know what these are. So you need to ask yourself the question, in case we ask you the question, do I have the capacity to perform these different tasks to show that I've got competence in these areas? Now, ultimately, as I said, the trainer will actually advise you if and how we're going to manage those questions for you. Now, it's not just one observation task either. There are multiple tasks there, so familiarize yourself with each one, and they follow a similar format. The required skills that you're after, the performance criteria, and when it comes down to it, the nitty-gritty of what you'd need to do. Do you have the capacity to conduct a risk analysis? Well, I can tell you, you would. If you've got this far, you would actually know how to do that. Can you develop strategies to reduce, minimize identified risks? And you would be able to do that as well. And so on and so on. So get yourself familiar with these observation tasks, because there's every likelihood that we'll be asking for some style of demonstration or evidence in those areas, but we'll let you know about that. You just need to assume that yes, you will need to be able to demonstrate further competence in those areas. Now, moving on to another assessment type that's listed here, third-party evidence. This really is going to only be applicable for those of you who are currently in the workforce. What this does is it allows you to work with your employer and to get them to evaluate and observe your performance of certain tasks that relate to this unit. So for example, managing people performance, to observe you performing certain tasks and assess you on that. And if I just come down a bit further on, There's all sorts of things that need to be ticked off by the third-party person to make sure that this information that they're giving us back is genuine and valid, and that all needs to be signed off and official. So don't treat that very lightly. That is certainly a somewhat binding document there that they'll be signing off on. So what might that third-party evidence look like that could be collected? Now again, remember, we can only really apply this if you're in the workplace. So I click on the third-party evidence, and here we go. Now once again, the great news is, regardless of whether we're doing this or not doing this, all learners who have got this far within the unit would absolutely be able to look at each one of these tasks to be observed, and they should be confident in their own mind that absolutely I can do that. I've done it. I've shown competence in that through some of my formative assessments or summative assessments, and I absolutely could show myself performing that in the workplace. So it's an interesting area, but certainly probably one that won't play heavily for a lot of our students unless you are actually actively working in the workplace itself. So not so much is going to come from that. Absolutely, work will probably be coming from observation reports, and you need to prepare accordingly, and definitely information will be coming from the formative and summative assessments.